2020 was the year the world changed. Like that. The whole world changed in 1 year. You couldn't make this up. It's a science fiction movie come true. Words like social distancing. Social distancing. Oh yeah, the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, they said you had to be 6 feet apart. Oh, they just changed it. It's okay, 3 feet apart. When I was a kid, they had us hiding under desks in air raid drills in case an atom bomb went off. Like, that's going to make a difference. You're under a desk. If you see a flash, don't look at it. If I see a flash, I'll be dust in seconds. That's the same thing they're doing with the COVID rules. They've robbed us of our freedom, and they've sold us fear and hysteria. I have to tell you, there's something going on bigger than the human mind can understand, as I see it. Your understanding of history is going to be totally rewritten. Because back in 2020, they weren't telling the truth of what was going on. You're not going to get a true understanding of how the world changed back then. Because the people that were seeing it differently than the people that changed it, they were blacklisted, blackballed, and censored. What you're watching now is the truth of what happened from people talking about it who don't have an agenda.
You get this, you know, there's no way you're going to be called a conspiracy theorist. It's a conspiracy fact.
Yeah, ain't that right?
So, and we really need to assist people, you know.
That's right.
This is why we're doing this. We're helping people. I've spent, you know, you spend your life doing this. Most people can't do that or don't want to, whatever. You can't blame people.
Yeah.
It literally ruins your life. I can speak for that. I like to look directly at people. I know that's, you know, it's not something that you guys want to do.
How do you feel comfortable?
Yeah, I think it's really important. People need to be looked at. They need to they're making eye contact with me, even though they're, you know, they're not here. But I am with the people. I think it's really important to look at the big picture here, because we're not just talking about something that started in 2020 or even in 1992 or in the early 1970s or even in the 1940s or back at the turn of the century. We're looking at something that I think we can pinpoint just for the purposes that we have now with Malthus, Thomas Malthus, who was a cleric. He was a demographer, actually, English demographer in the 1800s. And he's the one who decided that, well, there's just too much people using up too much stuff.
The power of population is so superior to the power of the earth to produce subsistence for man that premature death must in some shape or other visit the human race. The germs of existence contained in this spot of earth, with ample food and ample room to expand in, would fill millions of worlds in the course of a few thousand years.
In order to establish that this is not a conspiracy theory, that in fact what we're talking about is a conspiracy fact, we need to take a look at the greater picture, the larger overall historical picture for United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development.
Distinguished delegates have said that this is an historical moment. However, it will only be so if the Rio Conference also marks a new beginning.
So it's not just an ideology, it's an action plan. It's a blueprint to inventory and control all land, all water, all plants, all animals, all production, all construction, all law enforcement, all energy, all food, all information, everything on the planet, including you. Sustainable development. Now, when you see the term sustainable development, of course you think you know what it means, but you really don't know what it means. And when you see the term SMART, which is sustainability, monitoring, assessing, rating, and tracking you, there's total continuity between Malthus, a corporate group called the Club of Rome, universities, the philanthropies. You've got the corporate, the governance, and the foundations and organizations, including the Holy See, the Vatican. And their whole goal, and you're going to see this with the World Economic Forum, their whole goal is that same old dusty goal to control the population, to limit the population, to save the planet.
I'm Johnny Vedmore. I'm an investigative journalist for Unlimited Hangout. I like looking into ancestry quite a lot. You don't really know a person by who they present themselves to be nowadays. You're more likely to find out from their history, their background, who brought them up and who brought that person up, etc. In many cases, you find reoccurring manifestation of behavior within genetics in general. So you see that people do the same thing, take the same roads. When I see how people who worship darkness, how they rise to power, it's extremely suspect. And also when you get into things like that, and when you get into researching evil people, you can feel it, man. You can feel that there's something else there, that this can't be normal. If you've got a history which involves nefarious circles, you do want to hide it. And so that's not going to be presentable to the modern man.
Let's begin. Mr. Klaus Schwab.
Well, Klaus Schwab, a hard one to find. So before the World Economic Forum was created in 1971, Klaus Schwab's history was basically unknown. Some people thought he was a construct, that he was just a made-up persona. Some people didn't even think he exists.
Good morning.
It was very, very difficult to find even a mention of Klaus Schwab. I would say pre-1968, that's where he started to really come into his own, is in 1968, about 3 years before the creation of the World Economic Forum, which was originally the European Management Symposium. These sort of people, these big players, they don't let their childhood be known, because their childhood comes from, usually contains dark secrets. You usually find that they're connected with people who have not necessarily been good for the world. Klaus Schwab was born in 1938. So obviously those are fundamentally historic years in Western history. We're approaching World War II. Lots of people wanted to believe he was Hitler Youth or something, and he was fought, but by the end of the World War, he would have been 6 years old, so his father would have been the person he looked up to, and he did. He followed everything his father said. Now, his father was the head of a Nazi model company. Eugen Schwab was the managing director of the Ravensburg branch. Escher Weiss itself was making U-boat submarine parts, flamethrowers for the Germans during the time, atomic bombs and etc., and bits for fighter planes. So every single part of the war machine had a little bit of Escher Weiss in it. His father worked for the Nazis, creating heavy water, and heavy water was used in the enrichment of uranium. So it was a natural way of enriching uranium. Was Eugen Schwab part of the Nazis who were standing outside the Ravensburg town hall in 1938 where a picture was taken, that still causes controversy in that part of Germany when you mention it, because people hate seeing that all of the Nazis were so proud and happy. Ravensburg was such a big Nazi town. Ravensburg wasn't targeted all through the war. What you saw is a lot of rich German people who had helped within the race to eugenically modify the world. Including 691 patients in Ravensburg who were euthanized during the war. 691 who were euthanized. That's a lot of people who were euthanized in Ravensburg. Now, Klaus Schwab, through the 60s, was a young man who was in university, getting degree after degree after degree. And by 1966, 1967, his father told him, if you want to be a success, you've got to go to Harvard. And at this point is where he was taught by Henry Kissinger.
I have met practically every leader in the last 40 years. And there were only 3 or 4 leaders who really made a lasting impression on me and to a certain extent changed my thinking. And one of those was Mandela, another one was my teacher at Harvard 50 years ago, Professor Henry Kissinger.
He had a massive impact on Schwab's overarching ideology in the future. And that was partially because Kissinger was mixed up within a lot of groups, including very much the Rockefellers.
And you mentioned, David, Henry Kissinger.
Actually, I guess I was the first one who got to know him because he was a member of an organization called the Council on Foreign Relations in New York.
Now, Henry Kissinger himself, of course, the point man for the Club of Rome and for the ideology of population reduction. The Club of Rome was set up in 1968 by Aurelio Pecci, who was an Italian industrialist, and Alexander King, who was a Scottish chemist.
The Club of Rome comprises some 70 men of widely varying backgrounds, but their common concern is that the world problems cannot be solved by individual nations. I spoke with Dr. Aurelio Pecci, founder of the club, and Dr. Alexander King, director of the World Bank and the United Nations OECD.
They really concentrated on population control, on bringing down the population. They had Malthusian ideas.
It's not some science fantasy effect from 2001. This electronic display emanating from Australia's largest computer is a picture of the condition, past, present and future of planet Earth. It was developed under the auspices of the Club of Rome by an MIT research team to present a complex model of the world and what we humans are doing to it. What it does for the first time in man's history on the planet is to look at the world as one system. It shows that Earth cannot sustain present population and industrial growth for much more than a few decades. It shows that simply cleaning up our car exhausts and making some small effort to limit our families simply isn't enough. The condition of the planet starts to become highly critical, and if we don't do anything about it, this is what's going to happen. The quality of life is going to go right back to practically zero. Pollution is going to become so serious, right out here, that it will start to kill people. So the population will diminish. Right back here, less than it was in the year 1900. And at this stage, around about the year 2040, 2050, civilized life as we know it on this planet will cease to exist.
So this Malthusian idea would go along with the introduction of the World Economic Forum.
Damen und Herren, herzlich willkommen hier in Davos.
The world has become so interdependent that entrepreneurs everywhere in the world depend each on another.
I think he's very much the top front man of the ideology of the Rockefellers, Club of Rome, Henry Kissinger. They needed someone in Europe who had had experience with trying to bring people together, bring companies together. Klaus Schwab would say, you know, we have to really, really harness that human capital. And it's very much a sign that they were on the same wavelength as all of the people who had taught them, all the people who had brought them up, and the Club of Rome, and the people who were saying that we need population control if we're going to have success in the future. I think they saw him Klaus Schwab as the perfect person to take on their cause and rebrand their cause as something which was environmental rather than population control.
We have continuous partnerships with many governments around the world. Then, of course, we have NGOs, we have trade unions, we have all those different parts.
Media, of course.
Media, of course, and very important experts and scientists and academia. Because if we are looking at the future, I think we should look at new solutions, and the new solutions will be very much driven by technological development.
Eugenics is a hard thing to spin after World War II. The Malthusian idea of needing a disaster to create their agenda is really important. We could create disasters, or we could create, even if they're not real, we can create them to make sure that our agenda is pushed forward.
On behalf of the Center for Health Security, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the World Economic Forum. Welcome to Event 201.
Event 201 was a pandemic simulation. It was what they call a tabletop simulation. I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I'm president of Children's Health Defense. In the year 2000, Bill Gates and Tony Fauci shook hands on a partnership. Bill Gates flew Tony Fauci out to his mansion on Lake Washington in Seattle, and they made a deal that they were going to promote vaccines worldwide and have universal compliance. And they named their project the Decade of Vaccines. They said by 2020, they're going to have complete global compliance with their vaccine program. And that's when Gates began investing in all of these quasi-governmental agencies, creating them and also making large investments in vaccine companies and in mRNA vaccines in order to prepare for the date when what they call Disease X would suddenly appear. And if you look at these projections that they were during the years approaching 2019 and 2020, both men were repeatedly making these extraordinarily accurate predictions.
Well, we always have to worry that a new epidemic's going to come along. A flu epidemic that could go global. I think an epidemic, either naturally caused or intentionally caused, is the most likely thing to cause, say, 10 million excess deaths. To take a new way of building vaccines that could let us develop in less than a year a novel vaccine called DNA RNA vaccines, and so we'll fund a few projects.
Fauci was, we call him the Naiad Nostradamus, because he was literally to the day predicting the outbreak of this pandemic.
So in 2017, Tony Fauci promised the world this great epidemic and outbreak and disease. And he's not a fortune teller, and he's not clairvoyant. He's done this all along.
There is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak.
Wow. And then the other thing that I aspirationally hope to be able to encounter is the ability to rapidly respond to something brand new, whether it's a brand new pandemic.
Now to growing concerns about the deadly coronavirus officially hitting the U.S. Here's what we know.
As I was writing my book, I began researching Event 201, and I began stumbling across the fact that this was not a one-off simulation, that the same people had been doing these simulations basically annually since the year 2000. These simulations, which happen almost every year, had names like Operation Lockstep, Dark Winter.
But there was a simulation called Dark Winter that didn't come out very well, i.e. smallpox scored 1 and humanity scored 0.
We're about to go into a dark winter, a dark winter.
Dark Winter is the name of a legendary bioterror simulation that took place in June of 2001.
Good evening. We interrupt our regular programming to return to Southwest Medical Center and continuing coverage of the outbreak of a mystery sickness. Earlier today, hospital officials said they were admitting patients with symptoms that seemed to be severe adult chickenpox.
What's important also about Dark Winter is that the event it predicted went live several months later and was just very eerie, the similarities. For example, media personalities being sent anthrax letters in the mail. Judith Miller, who got one of those fake anthrax letters, was at Dark Winter.
The letters sent to NBC and the New York Post were the same. This is next. Take penicillin now. Death to America, death to Israel. Allah is great.
They were sent to Senate offices, and ironically, they were sent to the senators who had opposed the Patriot Act, who were needed to switch sides and say, yeah, we need to pump up the security state.
The FBI opened a criminal investigation at the U.S. Capitol today after a letter sent to Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle tested positive for anthrax.
Anthrax attacks are used then to justify the war in Iraq.
No way that Iran could have been the source of this anthrax.
This is my response.
That was the narrative that was initially pushed, and it was the narrative it was supposed to have until they realized that the anthrax used in the attacks was the AIM strain, which is only used by the U.S. military.
Can you tell us which strain it is, sir? And does the fact that these are a little bit...
AIM strain.
The AIM strain.
And what's important here in relation to Event 201 is that one of the main organizations that set up Dark Winter is now known as the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. It used to be the Center for Civilian Biodefense Studies. Those two people involved in writing Dark Winter, the main authors, were Tara O'Toole and Thomas Inglesby. Of course, Thomas Inglesby was the moderator for Event 201 because he now heads the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security because his former boss, Tara O'Toole, now works for the CIA at In-Q-Tel.
This girl over here, she's very good.
My name is Whitney Webb. I'm an investigative writer. I am the founder, and I currently write for Unlimited Hangout.
And people know about Event 201 because it was so uncannily prescient.
The goal of the Event 201 exercise is to illustrate the potential consequences of a pandemic and the kinds of societal and economic challenges it would pose.
This happened in October of 2019. We now know the virus, the coronavirus, was already circulating as of September 12th. 2019.
The Event 201 scenario is fictional, but it's based on public health principles, epidemiologic modeling, and assessment of past outbreaks. In other words, we've created a pandemic that could realistically occur.
And so a month after it begins circulating in the Pierre Hotel in New York City, they have this simulation, and who's at the simulation? Well, Bill Gates is the one who funds it. The key figure is Avril Haines, who's the former deputy director of the CIA, who is now the head of the National Security Agency. So she is the highest level spy in the world. And then they had representatives there from the health agencies and from the mainstream media companies.
The World Economic Forum has convened this board because of your combined expertise, your backgrounds, and your global voice.
And what are they talking about? They're talking about their planning for a coronavirus pandemic.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. At first, the spread was limited to those with close contacts, healthcare personnel, co-workers, and families. But now it's spreading rapidly throughout local communities.
My fellow Americans, tonight I want to speak with you about our nation's unprecedented response to the coronavirus outbreak that started in China and is now spreading throughout the world. Today, the World Health Organization officially announced that this is a global pandemic.
COVID deaths continue to rise, doubling in the last 2 weeks, now averaging more than 900 a day.
New York State was right
to put a 14-day mandatory quarantine in place. So starting today, we're going to do something new in New York City. We will have checkpoints at key entry points to the city.
If you're driving into Manhattan from New Jersey, don't be surprised if there's a deputy sheriff waiting to talk to you on the city side of the tunnel.
Morgan, Texas hit its highest average positivity rate since the start of the pandemic, topping 20%. What are officials saying about that number?
They're saying that it needs to go down, and not just a little bit, Allison, but drastically.
We're in a crisis of compassion. So for the first time in my career, doctors are turning their shoulders away from patients. They are denying patients care. So this is very, very important.
What does that mean? They're killing them.
They're killing
right?
them. They're killing them.
Dr. Peter McCullough is an internist and cardiologist from Dallas, Texas. He has a long and fairly famed history in medicine, which you can look up if you like, and you should. But more to the point, he has treated COVID a lot.
The scorecard for an academic doctor is the number of citations listed in the National Library of Medicine. I have over 600 citations in the National Library of Medicine. I'm considered the most published person in my field in the world in history. I've chaired and participated on more data safety monitoring boards for drug trials, for device and interventional trials. I've been the overall global principal investigator of studies. I've given presentations before the US FDA, the New York Academy of Sciences, the European Medicines Agency, and I can tell you as a doctor who sees patients with COVID-19 and treats them, I have 40 publications on COVID-19. I am supremely qualified to give my opinions on this crisis. In fact, more qualified than any other individual in the world. There's no one who has that convergence of experience face-to-face with the virus. What's gone on over time is a complete and total program to focus on everything else other than the sick patient. Doctors' eyes became clouded, their hearts became hardened, and they didn't offer the treatment to patients. So initially, there is a complete and total focus on what's called contagion control. Wearing masks, social distancing, hand sanitizers, lockdown, playing defense. Then the next move, some information about how to treat patients in the hospital, a few updates here and there, controversies regarding the drugs. The approaches in the hospital become clear that they're too late, and virtually all the deaths occur in the hospital. The hospital doesn't save the patients. So this concept of playing defense with contagion control and waiting for the hospitalization becomes very apparent, literally within a few months, that this isn't working. We're going to have millions and millions of hospitalizations. We're going to have hundreds of thousands of deaths in the United States with this strategy. Then everything comes into focus. Play defense with contagion control. Hospital, allow the deaths to basically happen because we haven't treated the virus early, and then it becomes clear what the game plan is. Wait for mass vaccination. So there became an understanding on my side of things that somehow my work was caught up in a very high stakes game. And a big part of this game was the suppression of any information on treatment to patients whatsoever. And so once it became known that the plan was mass vaccination, all efforts on treatment were dropped. People are using it as the Great Reset. And I think that's fundamentally clear. We are reset right now.
The COVID-19 crisis has shown us that our old systems are not fit anymore for the 21st century.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts.
We have a golden opportunity to seize something good from this crisis.
Today, with my Democratic colleagues, we have a framework for my Build Back Better initiative.
Building Back Better means getting support to the most vulnerable while maintaining our momentum on reaching the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs.
Therefore, we have a unique but rapidly shrinking window of opportunity to learn lessons and reset ourselves on a more sustainable path.
Rebalancing investment, harnessing science and technology, and advancing the transition to net zero emissions, all elements of the Great Reset, are fundamental to building the future we need.
In short, we need a great reset.
Now, without a doubt, the bomb is the most powerful weapon in the communist arsenal, but it's as a psychological weapon, not as a military one. The Soviets have gained more by using the bomb as a psychological weapon than they ever could have using it as a military weapon. Under the constant threat of nuclear annihilation, we've accepted concessions, compromises, and defeats one after another, which would have been unthinkable without that specter of a giant mushroom cloud fixed deep in our subconscious. As a matter of fact, the bomb, as a psychological weapon, is being dropped on the American people every single day.
Yeah, my name is Edward Griffin. That's actually my first name is George. My father's first name was George. My grandfather's first name was George, so they called me Edward as the middle name. But when I started to write my books, I used the name of G. Edward Griffin. It's very clear to me that most of the conflict we see in the world, especially the political conflict, is contrived, and it's not really authentic. That the people who are really behind this, I mean, at the ultimate apex of this world struggle, have complete control of both sides of just every major conflict. In the United States, there's something called the Council on Foreign Relations, which has about 4,000 people in it. They really, in my view, are the hidden government of the United States, because all of these people are in highly influential positions, and they have rings within rings, and they consider the Council on Foreign Relations to be about third out from the center. And we've come across something called the round tables, which are sort of a vestige of, I would call it a secret society, and they do too, formed by Cecil Rhodes. Inside of that, there's a very small group, and you come across names that keep popping up all the time, like Rothschild and Rockefeller, and it seems like every time you get to the top of this pyramid, the occult gets exposed at some significant level. When people ask me when I thought the New World Order might happen.
The purpose of this presentation is to show not only that there is a grand design, but that it has been the consistent, dominant force behind absolutely every major move by the United States in the foreign policy field since at least the end of World War II.
They said, well, when do you think that would happen? I said, it's already here. It's just that it's being built brick by brick around us every day, and we don't recognize it. It's already here. The foundation is here. It's been here ever since the end of World War II. I could see that all the propaganda was being perpetuated primarily through the schools and then the media. And I said, this is happening right now. I mean, it's already here. The only question is we didn't know how strong the control mechanisms were. Well, now, when COVID came along, we saw that the control mechanisms were very strong. Like at the flip of a switch, all of the major countries of the world were saying the same thing and doing the same thing in lockstep. Like in 24 hours, somebody said, go, and they all went. It was like there's mushrooms coming up out of the grass after a night's rain. They were there all along. We just didn't know them. The New World Order doesn't arrive at a certain moment in time. It's been here a long time. It's just been gradually building, and the walls are getting higher and higher, and the exits are getting filled in as time goes by. So where are we in that process? I don't know how to measure that, except we're dangerously close to the completion.
9/11 was the security state. COVID is the surveillance state. Global crisis requires global response, and that justifies global governance, and that's where we're at. So what you're saying is that media is a handmaiden of this plan. Media is actually a piece of this plan. Anything that you see on the mainstream media, and much of other media as well, is directed It's manipulated.
And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
I think the arrival of a completely controlled media is much like the arrival of the New World Order. This extreme point of unity that we see for the first time in history, in my mind, it points to the conclusion that this New World Order that they keep talking about for the future is here. So the question of how important is the media, I would say it is the second most important thing to the whole charade. The first thing would be the planning and strategy and putting your troops in place, and you're getting your agents in position and rehearsing what you're going to do. But then you have to sell it to the American people as being real.
I know that these stories of our fellow Americans puncture that armor that is natural to have accumulated over the past year, and that's okay.
You know, when you look at the Johns Hopkins map, you know, of these red dots of the virus is here and the virus is there and the virus is coming after you, you know, that's just, you know, a psyop. That's psychological warfare. The disease here is fear.
The media basically creates history. On or about the December 10th, media announced it was going to create history with the Trusted News Initiative.
Last month, I convened what we called a Trusted News Summit at the BBC, which was behind closed doors and brought together global tech platforms and publishers, people who believe in what we've been talking about over the last two days. And the goal was to arrive at a practical set of actions we could take together to tackle the rise of misinformation and bias.
The Trusted News Initiative said, we are going to band together and we're going to squash anything that leads to vaccine hesitancy.
Okay, you have vaccine resistant, skeptical, hesitant, and then you have just, I'm not taking it. A restaurant owner in California posted signs calling on customers to show proof that they have not gotten the vaccine. He's also banned diners from wearing masks inside and put up this massive billboard that says, leave the mask, take the cannoli. Tony Roman is the owner of Basilico's Pasta e Vino, and he joins me now from inside his restaurant.
We banned masks. We didn't make them optional. We banned them. I felt that the masks represented the lockdowns. If the mask had went away day one and people would have ripped them off their faces, it would have been over. They, to me, represent fear, control, surrender, and everything else. It has to do with the lockdown. So we banned them.
The whole reason this is happening is because people won't protect themselves, Tony. I mean, what are you thinking?
Then why did you leave your house when you had COVID? I mean, you had it, and you left your house. I mean, it's been documented.
First
right?
of all,
So
it has been
I want you to
documented.
answer that.
My ass, it's been documented.
Just last week, Cuomo admitted getting into a fight with a bicyclist who harassed him for going outside and congregating with other people, something CNN has been vilifying ordinary people for wanting to do.
So what I did is I said we're not going to have any restrictions at all, zero, from day one until now. It's the same. What you see in here now is exactly how it's been all along. Zero restrictions. We're going to be open inside and out. We're going to defy openly. There's not going to be tinted windows. We're not going to have a back door. We're not going to be a speakeasy. We are going to do it boldly, and we're not going to resist. We're going to attack the lockdowns.
Tony, it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. I gave you a chance to make the case. I wish you well. I hope your family stays safe.
I made my case. You didn't have much to say.
I mean, honestly, you sound like an idiot, so there's not much to say. But, Tony, good luck with it. See you.
And so do you.
Yeah.
We were getting bombarded with one-star hateful reviews all over the internet. We were getting calls threatening to murder me, to kill me, threats to burn the restaurant down, threats to spread the virus inside. We were getting hundreds of calls, and the phone would not stop ringing. It was non-stop.
It's funny how every time they would cancel somebody, it's always toward the solution that they want. Like the fabulous Fauci were coming out and just, we can only use the L word. He was lying. The guy is I don't want to swear or anything, but he's a camera whore. He would get on whatever camera he could and tell the people in the audience what they expected to hear. So he was early on coming out, telling the truth.
When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is.
The fabulous Fauci says, well, you don't need to wear a mask, until the politics switched, and now masks have become a cult.
And I think, one of the important things that we're emphasizing right now that really evolved from a situation that did change is our insistence now on wearing masks.
And at the beginning of this, they did a study, and they sent out thousands of people in each group, some people with no masks, some people with no difference. But they wanted people in masks. They wanted that fear to be spread. They needed that fear to be spread. They still want that fear to be spread. And what happened if you try to bring up the study on YouTube? Cancel. You try to bring it up on Twitter? Cancel.
Okay, well, let's just take a step back, look at history, and ask yourself, how many times have the people that are in favor of censorship been the good guys? 0 times. 100% of the time, they have been the bad guys. So I think that enables you to look at the world around us today and determine who are the bad guys and who are the good guys.
There was a group of doctors yesterday, a large group that were put on the internet, and for some reason the internet wanted to take them down.
They just try to get them canceled, or they try to get them deplatformed or doxxed or something like that. They just go straight to the, our social media overlords.
Would you consider doing the same thing with anti-vaxxers, saying that you would remove misinformation?
We work with the CDC and we work with the WHO and trusted health organizations to remove clear misinformation.
I would argue that really the national security state in Silicon Valley, a lot of these biggest companies, that union has been there from the very beginning, but now it's just more explicit than ever. The day Facebook, its creation, was announced was the exact same day that a DARPA program that is exactly like what Facebook is, was shut down after public controversy. And this comes at a period of time when after September 11th, DARPA was trying to create this series of extremely invasive surveillance programs called Total Information Awareness, or TIA, that was going to be headed up by General John Poindexter, but it was so controversial because even mainstream media acknowledged that it would totally eliminate privacy as we know it. Zuckerberg was chosen by Peter Thiel because Peter Thiel is the person that ensured that Facebook became what it is today. And at the time of Facebook's founding is around the same time that Palantir was founded as well. And so during that period of time, Peter Thiel was being led around by Richard Pearl, of all people, the neocon, and was given meetings with people like Poindexter because it was his mission to recreate total information awareness, but as an entirely private sector project. So these people have always really viewed media as necessary to further their agenda.
One of the things that's become clear and is readily traceable is that we now have a level of horizontal integration across the pharmaceutical industry, media and government, and big tech that has never existed before. That's created an opportunity for propaganda that has never existed before in the history of the world.
We're watching an alignment of powerful institutions like we've never seen before in human history. And the last simulation, the last seminar, Event 201, was a communication strategy. What does that mean? It's not about communicating good treatments. It's about how to censor, how to propagandize the public, and how to censor dissent.
There's been some conspiracy theories that are around about the potential that pharmaceutical companies or the UN have released this for their own benefit. So as we move forward, obviously trust in pharmaceuticals and government is very important at this moment. And so as we move forward with developing the right scenarios, we have to make sure that the public communication is a major part of that because of these conspiracy theories.
It is clear that there is a concerted global propaganda effort driving towards universal vaccination.
Why do you think the people are so quick to get vaccinated? They're brainwashed. And again, stop calling them big pharma. They're drug dealers. Get it in your head. They're drug dealers, and a drug dealer will do anything. Anything. Anything.
So I've been warned by an experienced wartime journalist that I need to recognize the threat to my personal security because I am creating risk for mega capital. The thing is, if a sniper decides to set up across the street and pick me off, no number of shotguns is going to stop that. It's going to happen.
Papai lile lilikuwa positive kwamba lina corona. Maana yake maji mle ndani zilizotolewa mle kwenye papai ni positive.
Tanzania's president has said the country has been healed of coronavirus through prayer.
June 2020, he declared Tanzania COVID-19 free and carried out campaigns and other engagements in disregard of the containment measures that had been advised by the World Health Organization.
The president of Tanzania is missing. I know it sounds and seems almost impossible in this day and age.
Magufuli denounced vaccines and dismissed coronavirus test kits as faulty because they returned positive results on samples taken from a goat and a pawpaw. Last night, the Tanzanian vice president told the nation that John Magufuli had died.
I tell you a story that sheds light on how this massive level of compliance all over the world almost simultaneously descended and successfully hoodwinked millions and millions of people to comply with this corona deal. How did people suddenly suspend their lives, go into lockdown, risk an experimental gene therapy that's not approved, threaten their fertility, wear a face diaper that doesn't work? How did all this compliance settle in so quickly?
The experiment that was almost certainly funded by the CIA was an experiment called the Milgram experiment.
An experiment is being conducted in the Elegant Interaction Laboratory at Yale University.
Milgram devised an experiment to see how willing people would be to bring harm on strangers. So Milgram put an ad in the local newspaper in New Haven, Connecticut, asking for people to sign up for a memory test. Sure enough, 40 people from all economic backgrounds.
Construction workers, students, professors.
And an educational level from one who had not finished elementary school to subjects who have doctorate.
What they didn't know was that they were actually being enrolled in an experiment on human compliance under the threat of pressure from a doctor to see how much harm they would inflict on someone. So the respondents in this test were to be the teachers. And the learners was actually a paid actor.
The victim was an accomplice of the experimenter. The drawing was rigged so that the naive subject was always the teacher, and the accomplice always became the learner.
And it would be a man in the white lab coat who called himself doctor, who was in their room, who would be giving instructions.
Every time the learner got an answer wrong, they got zapped.
Red, that is incorrect. This will be at 3:30.
Milgram had one person after another undergo this pressure-filled situation where when the unseen student or learner made a mistake, he would have to administer this shock.
Next was slow. Wrong. Answer is neck. 300 volts.
I absolutely refuse to answer anymore. Get me out of here. You can't hold me here. Get me out. Get me out of here.
Continue. The next word is green, please. Green, grass, hat, ink, apple.
He couldn't see that person, but he could hear the screams, the bleeding, the begging, the crying.
How compliant would they be to inflict pain on someone when a doctor says, you must continue, you must follow the orders, the experiment requires that you continue?
We must continue. Go on, please. You're going to keep giving, what, 450 volts every shot now? That's correct.
How many people do you think, if they were studied in these conditions, would administer a maximum lethal shot of electricity?
Well, personally, I think, yeah, if you get one or two, you'd be lucky.
The actual percentage of people in the Milgram experiment who went all the way.
67% of them turned it up to 450 volts where it was marked on the dial potentially fatal.
There's too many left here. I mean, geez, he gets wrong here. There's too many of them left.
Most of the subjects of this experiment were begging not to be forced to do it. Many of them were crying.
I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please.
A shock of 105 volts.
75 volts, Jim.
And what Milgram concluded is that for 67% of the population, an authoritative voice will overwhelm personal values and their conscience. And today, it seems to me, we're all involved in a mass Milgram experiment where we have a doctor, Dr. Fauci, who is ordering us to abandon our values.
You hear a lot of talk about the fourth industrial revolution. And, you know, a lot of people are thinking, well, I don't even know what that is. You know, what? I don't see an industrial revolution. There's no big buildings going up. There's no big machinery happening. Well, the first, second, and third industrial revolutions mainly were focused on energy and electronics. The fourth industrial revolution is the revolution of the human being.
We need to be courageous in our vision for the future. We need to stride with purpose towards creating the world we would like to see emerging. COVID-19, if anything, has accelerated this ongoing industrial revolution. It is very important to embrace the fourth industrial revolution and its technology, as it will determine our future prosperity like nothing else.
One of the features of this fourth industrial revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
It's a revolution to change the way human beings are.
Which they're trying to think about basically immortality, life prolongation for them.
I think we're heading to a world where Elon Musk putting brain chips inside people's head.
You're a neuroscience company, and you're working to build basically an interface to the brain.
Yeah. Electrode to neuron interface at a micro level.
Okay, what is it? Like, I'm gonna have like a plug in my head that's gonna fit into a hard drive? Like, or how does that work?
Yeah. A chip and a bunch of tiny wires.
This would be implanted surgically. And it would do what? Could you input? Could you download Jim?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, what?
Elon Musk, I believe, is just a front man for the AI and the transhumanist agenda of much bigger people.
Certainement dans les 10 années à venir. Et d'abord, on va les implanter dans nos vêtements, c'est-à-dire wearables, comme on le dit. Et après, on pourrait s'imaginer qu'on les implante dans nos cerveaux ou dans notre peau. Et à la fin, peut-être il y a une communication directe entre notre cerveau et le monde digital. Ce que nous voyons, c'est une sorte de fusion du monde physique, digital et biologique.
Humanity 2.0, the Internet of Things, it's all part of Klaus Schwab's fourth industrial revolution. I know no one who's more articulate, who has the intellectual chops and the historical understanding than Dr. Miklos Lukas.
We are all created in the image of God. But that poses a serious limitation to the fourth industrial revolution, Great Reset, New Normality agenda. Because what we want now, not we, but what they want, the elites, which you can see with faces and names and surnames in all these meetings around the world, is that they want a new humanity, a more perfect humanity. Transhumanism is defined, as a process of human enhancement through the application of technologies into human beings. Enhancement in terms of intellectual, physical, cognitive, and even moral enhancement. Transhumanists will say this is positive eugenics. This is not negative eugenics. Hitler was mean because that was negative eugenics. He posed on people against their will. This idea is being pushed, the deconstruction of human beings, the reality of human beings, the nature of human beings denied. The fourth industrial revolution is transhumanism turned into global public policy.
Either we destroy ourselves by some nuclear catastrophe or ecological catastrophe, or we will upgrade and change ourselves into something very different from Homo sapiens. So that in 200 years, Earth is dominated by entities which are more different from us than we are different from Neanderthals.
The central planners see themselves as the enlightened group, right? They're the enlightened few, therefore they should control everyone else. But artificial intelligence takes it to the next level. Artificial intelligence does a better job of controlling things than they could ever imagine, right? So artificial intelligence therefore becomes like their God, in the sense that if throughout humanity, we have deferred the decision-making process, if you will, to a higher entity or to a higher being. Well, what we should do in the future, their words, not mine, is we should just delegate everything to the new God, which is artificial intelligence.
The creationist idea that all life forms are designed by God, and sometimes people tell me, don't use the word intelligent design. But it is intelligent design. What we are about to see in the world, it's just not the intelligent design of the God of the Bible. It's the intelligent designs of human beings and increasingly of algorithms. This is why I referred to the intelligent design of clouds, of the cloud computing. That designing a life form is such a complicated thing to do, but in all likelihood, no human being will be able to do it. But our algorithms may be able to do it for us.
At some point, decision-making powers from individuals will be outsourced to algorithms. So in the future, we might not even need elections because the algorithms will decide.
These presidents and CEOs, they will be choosing between options dictated by algorithms, often without really understanding how they came to these options and what do these options mean.
That gradual transition of decision-making powers from humans to algorithms. People might think, oh, this is so science fiction. It might not be science fiction because the algorithms that are being developed are so powerful that they might replace human decision-making powers.
And therefore, if we need to kill this person, or if we need to wipe out this town or this city, or if we need to have a one-child policy, if we need to put the world on lockdown for the next 5 years, oh, we got to follow the artificial intelligence because they know better than we know. Again, you just have to look at it as though it's their God.
And that's why I think a lot of these elites are just so arrogant because they want to create this technology that's never existed before and push everything to this point of singularity, but they don't know what it's going to do once it's there. Maybe it will hate them all. It's not that this technology is inherently bad. I mean, you can have that opinion, but if the people guiding its development and creating it and deciding how it's going to be used are the worst people in the world and are provable criminals, what do you think they'll use it for?
Things that can be like gel-like structures, like a trap bot, things like that. You look that up. It has long tendrils or gel-like, string-like substances that can go and gather things from the body and be programmed to go to a certain place in the body.
How would you program something to navigate, especially something so small?
What we've designed, and we've done this very, very quietly, but we're glad to now release it to the world, is this idea of Teslaphoresis, which is a discovery we made. The simplest way to understand it is self-assembly at a distance, just long-distance assembly of materials.
Welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city, or should I say, our city. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense for us in this city.
The new design of regional plans is to redesign all cities to transit-oriented development, high-density development in the center of cities where you have no private space.
In our city, we don't pay any rent because someone else is using our free space whenever we do not need it. My living room is used for business meetings when I am not there.
And that goes right back to the 2030 agenda, the Great Reset agenda, where you'll own nothing, but you'll be happy. Well, if I own nothing, who owns everything? Wealth is not a currency unit. Wealth is not gold. Wealth is not Bitcoin. Wealth is goods and services.
Shopping? I can't really remember what that is. For most of us, it has been turned into choosing things to use. Sometimes I find this fun, and sometimes I just want the algorithm to do it for me.
They're heading towards, and they openly state it, they're heading towards the extinction of the human race and changing it into something else, into something which is more of a computer.
My biggest concern is all the people who do not live in our city. Those we lost on the way. Those who decided that it became too much, all this technology. Those who felt obsolete and useless when robots and AI took over big parts of our jobs. Those who got upset with the political system and turned against it. They live different kinds of lives outside of the city. Some have formed little self-supplying communities. Others just stayed in the empty and abandoned houses in small 19th century villages.
Their future is one where the sky's dark, the seas are brown, and you're arrested for things you haven't even done yet.
Even in the World Economic Forum's own articles, they talk about by that year, they hope to be able to surveil people's thoughts and even their dreams.
Once in a while, I get annoyed about the fact that I have no real privacy. Nowhere I can go and not be registered. I know that somewhere, everything I do, think, and dream of is recorded. I just hope that nobody will use it against me. All in all, it is a good life. Much better than the path we were on.
What I see is the gradual outsourcing of human reproduction to technology. What does that mean, the full outsourcing of human reproduction in all its stages to technology? Well, it means that you have full control of the numbers and full control over the type of human being that is going to come out. If you want to see the kind of world we're moving forward, it's this world. And to just give a glimpse of it, it's a world which is fully automatized, where everything is measured, where emotions are replaced by numbers, rankings, indicators, where we live as units.
This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to 0. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to 0. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to 0. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Bill Gates is on the spectrum of autistic. Would you agree? He can't be autistic in the genuine sense. He's more of a psychopath. If you have to make a diagnosis, because autism impairs you to the degree that you can't anticipate the responses of other people. These people are operating on a much higher level. It's much nearer to what would be psychopathy. Now, whether they get some weird traits that look like autism, I don't know. But that's, autistic people are victims. They're not going to be taking over the world. They're sociopaths.
I'm entering into the second part of my research about the World Economic Forum. At the beginning, the formation, you had people like Aurelio Peccei who came and spoke about the limits of growth and did a Malthusian speech in, I think it was 1973 World Economic Forum, which was seen as a centerpiece. And really they were talking about humans being the enemy. Humans being the enemy. The enemy of humans is humans. The people in the World Economic Forum, they flock to that idea. They flock, and they only bring in people who have that same ideology.
Now, 11 billion people, still a lot, but the good news is that the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down.
The other thing for me has been the personal journey of coming to terms with what the World Economic Forum really represents. And I really resisted that. You know, people initially were coming to me talking about the Great Reset.
You say this is the biggest experiment ever done on a human population. That has intent to it.
I was like, oh, this is crazy talk. The problem is it's really hard in my mind to differentiate between incompetence and collusion and conspiracy. You know?
That sounds like a conspiracy theory.
It sure sounds like a conspiracy. Yeah, yeah.
Great Reset.
Yeah, but then it's all documented. And then you see it being deployed.
I would argue that WEF is a front organization, just like Epstein was a front man. They're the front people for the same ideology and the same entity, if you will, whatever that entity is.
Some of the really guilty ones have their hands in the mire and the blood. And so the guys that really are in the inner sanctum, this is how pyramidal hierarchies work. Only a few of them know exactly what the goals are and how to accomplish the goals.
There has always been an impulse in humanity that we could call evil.
This whole reset that the enemy is trying to do is trying to bring back a Tower of the Babel scenario, a pre-Noah scenario. And so they're trying to move everything of God out.
People know. People innately know that something is going wrong. Something doesn't make sense. I think there is very much a spiritual nature to this. People are reaching out to each other and saying, listen, what can this really be?
It's total control over the people. Total control. And it's global. It's global.
The non-godly system erodes human rights and leads to a structure where the superhuman feels that he has the right to decide who lives and dies because they don't believe in the sanctity of life. They believe in survival of the fittest.
And then the final solution, which is a year to 2 years off, is the vaccine. So we've got to go full speed ahead on all three fronts.
Just to head off the conspiracy theorists, maybe we shouldn't call the vaccine the final solution. Maybe just the best solution.
In Revelation 18:23, it says, "For thy merchants, thy businessmen were the great men of the earth." It says the merchants are the greatest men of that generation. And by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. The word sorceries there used in our English Bible is the Greek word pharmacia. It spoke in the first century about medication, that in the last days, this last political beast system that arises up on the global scene with 10 kings over it, that it's going to use pharmacia to deceive all nations. The man of sin, the greatest tyrant the world is ever going to see. Everything you're seeing now is preparing the stage. The world leaders think they're going to get the power, but it's about to be taken off them by this political leader, a brilliant man inspired by the devil himself. When you go to Revelation chapter 13, you read about the rise of this world global leader. 2,000 years ago, the Bible predicts that this man of sin is going to put a mark on the right hand and forehead, and you will use that to trade, to buy, to sell, to function in society.
We've been having the beast system for quite some time, and it's only been evolving in power. And so every country is going along with this COVID thing, just like every country is going to have to go along with the tracking, and every country is going to have to just go along with it, exactly what the Bible says.
The very words of the book of the Apocalypse concerning the reign of the Antichrist. No one could buy or sell unless he bore the mark.
They're going towards where you cannot buy or sell unless you have an ID, a tattoo, a digital ID, a brand, an etch, a mark.
There is no evidence of this, and let's not equivocate. There is no microchip or tracking device or some sort of other product that's attached to these vaccines.
Yeah, I think there's there's a lot of anxiety for good reason in the country right now, and a lot of tension, and people are more glued at home. They have more time. So in some ways, maybe this was inevitable, but I know my husband is not vaccinating people and putting a microchip in her arm because that technology doesn't even exist, and he's never uttered the words out of his mouth. So
the technology exists to include very small implantables that they could deploy other functionality for other purposes. It's entirely possible, and I suspect in our lifetimes we will see it happen.
Resist. And to reclaim our government, to reclaim our lives, to reclaim our liberty for our children, for our country, and for all future generations. And I can tell you this, I will stand side by side with you, and that if I have to die for this, I'm going to die with my boots on.
Maybe you're going to have to draw that line and say, no, I'm not willing. I will not go along. It stops. It stops with me. I am not participating in this plan. I will not comply. I will never comply. I am willing to lose my life over this. And you know, I'll tell you, that's my choice. But at a certain point, it won't be my choice anymore.
I'm fighting for my freedom. There's no place to run. People ask me, are you going to leave? Where are you going to go?
There's no better side to stand on than the side of truth, and the side of justice, and the side of honesty.
God has blessed me to be on the front lines of this, and I get to go into battle against these people.
Just live with optimism, hope, put your faith in God. The fact that I continue to be is a proof that He wants me to be. And that's enough reason to want to be alive and to be great.
This is evil, and I'm going to fight it, whether I will win or not. You know, I tend to be motivated by what I do from a moral place. So I'm going to continue to hold on to that. Whether it results in something or not, I mean, I don't really see any other alternative.
I would like the future to know that I made a difference somehow. And I'm hoping that when people, if they see this in the future, they will say, job well done.
I believe that we are here for a purpose, and we have a responsibility, and we should be acting on that.
We are here for a reason. We're on the right side of history. We are. We are on the right side of history. And we're not complicit. We haven't lost our compassion, and we certainly haven't lost our faith.